Some movies don't just flop, they get shredded. We're counting down the 10 most hated films in human history, where even the biggest names in Hollywood like Spielberg or Coppola couldn't save these disasters. If there's one fan base you don't want to mess with, it's Star Wars fans. They practically invented the whole mega franchise craze. From the original trilogy to endless merch, they've devoured it all. But when the prequels came along, that love took a hit. The Phantom Menace wasn't great, but even that pales in comparison to the rage unleashed by The Last Jedi. Disney was supposed to save the galaxy, but instead, The Last Jedi divided fans like never before. Rian Johnson's bold decisions weren't just risky, they felt like a slap in the face to decades of lore, and while it wasn't a total disaster, it's hard to argue the franchise ever fully recovered. Here's a horror debate for you. Did Halloween spark the slasher craze, or was it Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Either way, we can all agree on one thing. Rob Zombie's 2007 Halloween remake was a disaster. Zombie took everything that made John Carpenter's original terrifying and trashed it, giving us a Michael Myers origin story nobody asked for and turning Laurie Strode into a completely unlikable character. Horror fans didn't just dislike it, they hated it. The MCU ruled the 2010s, but let's be honest, things haven't been the same since. Enter Eternals, the movie everyone seems to point to when discussing Marvel's recent slump. With a star-studded cast including Angelina Jolie and Salma Hayek, you'd expect fireworks, but what we got was a bloated, messy introduction to characters who haven't really mattered since. The ambition was there, sure, but Eternals became the poster child for a franchise that was starting to lose its spark. No movie had bigger shoes to fill than The Godfather, Part 3. Following two of the most celebrated films in cinema history, expectations were sky high, and maybe that was the problem. The third installment follows Michael Corleone in his later years, but while the story had potential, fans were quick to rip it apart. Al Pacino did his best to carry the film, but it was Sofia Coppola's performance that drew most of the heat. Even Sofia later admitted she wasn't devastated by the criticism, saying it was never her dream to be an actress anyway. Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes remake seemed like it had potential. After all, Burton was known for his unique, quirky style, and Planet of the Apes was a classic sci-fi franchise. But what we got in 2001 was a baffling mess that struggled with a convoluted plot, awkward pacing, and questionable performances. The movie had a budget of $100 million, but felt like it lacked any of the ambition or depth of its predecessor. And then there's that ending, with the infamous twist that made absolutely no sense and went down in history as one of the worst in film history. Seriously, what was that? When it comes to superhero movies, Fantastic Four is the poster child for wasted potential. Fans of the beloved comic book series were hoping for an exciting, faithful adaptation, but instead, they got a disaster. With production issues, studio meddling, and a script that butchered the source material, this film was dead on arrival and ended up with a $60 million loss for the studio. Even critics barely bothered to tear it apart. Fans had already done that. Suicide Squad had so much promise. A team of supervillains forced to work together, that could have been a blast. But David Ayer's version turned out to be a messy, incoherent jumble, even with a star-studded cast that included Margot Robbie and Will Smith. The film's reputation only got worse when James Gunn's The Suicide Squad came out 5 years later and showed how much better the concept could be. Ayer's Suicide Squad was left looking like the awkward first draft. Who in their right mind thought the Emoji Movie was a good idea? This movie was an insult to cinema, packed with product placement for apps like LinkedIn and Candy Crush. Audiences couldn't believe the sheer lack of creativity on display, and critics were quick to call it out for being nothing more than a cash grab. It might just be the worst movie of the 21st century and a prime example of Hollywood at its most shameless. Indiana Jones was once the king of action-adventure films, with Spielberg crafting 3 iconic movies in the 80s. But when Kingdom of the Crystal Skull hit theaters in 2008, fans were left wondering what on earth had happened to their beloved franchise. The introduction of aliens, some truly terrible CGI, and a plot that was just plain ridiculous turned this once great series into a joke. And honestly, its only saving grace is that it doesn't look quite as bad now compared to 2023's Dial of Destiny. Avatar: The Last Airbender fans were ready for a live-action adaptation of their favorite show, but what they got was pure disappointment. This movie was a half-hearted, clumsy attempt that left fans furious. It missed the mark on every level, turning a richly detailed world into something lifeless and flat. It's no wonder fans treated the film like target practice. And it's almost surprising Netflix was brave enough to give the live-action concept another go.